Have you ever wondered what happens when light falls in love with darkness? When the warmth of spring is stolen by the cold breath of the underworld. This is a story from ancient Greek mythology, where gods walked among mortals, and every season carried the heartbeat of a forgotten sorrow. It is the story of Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and the girl who became queen of the underworld. They say she was born from sunlight itself, a soul of warmth and laughter, who danced through meadows where every flower turned its face toward her. But beneath that beauty, the earth trembled, and far below, in the realm of shadows, someone was watching. His name was Hades, Lord of the dead, ruler of a silent kingdom where time stands still. He wasn't cruel, only lonely. And in that loneliness he reached for the one thing that the dead could never touch: life itself. On that day, the ground split open like a sigh, and the world above lost its spring. The flowers wilted, the light faded, and Persephone, the child of the sun, was taken into the dark. But this isn't just a tale of abduction. It's a story of balance, of how even darkness learned to bloom. Because in the underworld, she did not vanish. She changed. She became something eternal. From blossoms to shadows, from innocence to destiny. This is how a girl became a goddess, and how death learned the beauty of life. So lie back, breathe slow, and listen as the earth remembers. Because tonight, the story unfolds. The day Persephone was taken by darkness and became the queen of the dead. If calm stories like this bring you peace, take a moment to subscribe and tell me in the comments where in the world this story finds you tonight. Crescent moon. The earth was breathing. A hush of warmth lingered in the air, the kind that only the goddess Demeter could summon. Every leaf, every blade of grass awakened beneath her touch, and among the golden fields, laughter bloomed like sunlight itself. Her name was Persephone, a laughter that carried life itself. When she ran, the wind followed. When she smiled, flowers turned their faces toward her. She was the daughter of spring, the living pulse of the world. Demeter watched her from afar, and in her eyes was the kind of love that could stop time. Every harvest, every season, every breath of earth's sweetness, all of it existed because her daughter did. Sometimes Demeter would whisper to the sky, "Oh sun, even if you ever fade, the world will still glow because my child walks upon it." But far below the soil, deep in the veins of the world, someone else was listening. Hades, Lord of the underworld. His realm was not made of gold or light, but of stillness, of echoes that had forgotten their source. He had never seen life, only what remained after it ended. Yet one day, when his gaze wandered upward, he saw her, the girl who danced with the light. And for the first time in eternity, darkness wanted to touch something warm. Persephone was wandering alone one afternoon, a wreath of flowers in her hand, white narcissus, red poppies, and a strange violet bloom she had never seen before. She knelt down, touched it gently, and in that breathless instant, the earth went still, the air froze, the birds silenced, and then a rumble, soft at first, then deep, ancient, alive. The ground beneath her split open like a sigh, petals scattered in the wind, and from the crack, shadows poured, followed by the glint of silver and obsidian. A chariot rose from the dark, pulled by black horses whose hooves sparked like stars. And standing upon it was Hades himself. He did not roar. He did not rage. He simply reached out his hand. Persephone froze. For a moment she saw not a monster, but a man carved from solitude, wearing centuries of silence. She turned to run, but the earth held her still. The flowers slipped from her fingers, and in that heartbeat, life was taken from life itself. Hades whispered something the wind could not carry, something between apology and desire. Then the ground swallowed them whole. The earth sealed itself again, quiet and unmoving, as if nothing had ever happened. But above, Demeter felt it. The warmth in the air faded. The birds forgot to sing, and the fields, once alive with green, began to turn pale. "Where is my daughter?" she cried to the heavens. But the gods only looked away. Seasons stilled, rivers slowed, and for the first time, the world began to wither, because Persephone, the child of spring, was gone, drawn into a place where time no longer breathed. Below, the underworld waited, a kingdom of silence, of endless night. And yet, in that darkness, a strange kind of stillness held her. For Persephone, it was the first touch of something eternal. Not death, not life, but a space between them. Above, her mother wept, and with every tear, the earth grew barren. Below, Hades watched her, not as a conqueror, but as a witness to something he could never have, light. And between those two worlds, a story began to breathe, of balance, of sorrow, of the thin, trembling line between love and loss. This was the beginning of how a girl became a goddess, how spring fell into shadow, and how the earth learned to sleep. Persephone had taken her first step, from sunlight into silence. But the story was only beginning. For a long while, there was nothing but silence. Not the kind that rests gently, but the kind that presses down, like the weight of an ocean. Persephone opened her eyes, and there was no sky, only a soft, blue-gray glow that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The air was cold, not cruelly but anciently. It smelled of stone, of memory, of something that had forgotten what sunlight felt like. She tried to move, but the ground beneath her was smooth, dark marble. It hummed faintly, as if the world itself was breathing from beneath. Her hands trembled. Her voice broke into the stillness. "Where am I?" No one answered. Only her own echo returned, slow, hollow, and endless. Then she heard it, the distant sound of hooves, the same rhythm that had thundered through the earth before the world cracked open. They were softer now, slower, almost regretful. The darkness parted, and the faint shimmer of silver appeared, a crown gleaming in the dim light, and eyes that looked like burnt amber caught in stone. Hades. He stood tall, silent, unhurried, like time itself had shaped him from shadow and solitude. His cloak trailed behind him like smoke, his expression unreadable. Persephone stepped back. The echo of her footfalls filled the endless chamber. "Why have you brought me here?" she whispered. For a moment he said nothing, only the faint movement of his hand, as though he was unsure whether to reach for her or let her remain untouched. Finally his voice came, deep, slow, and echoing through the stone walls. "Because the world above does not know what it keeps from me." Persephone frowned. "I am not yours to take." A flicker passed through his face, something between pain and understanding. "I did not take you," he said quietly. "The earth gave you to me." The words lingered, strange and heavy. She turned away, unable to breathe. All around her, faint lights began to appear, not flames, but pale blue glows floating in the air. She stepped closer. They moved when she did, hovering like whispers. Souls. They were souls, wandering, gentle, and endlessly patient. Each one carried a faint echo of who they once were. A laugh, a memory, a last goodbye. Persephone's eyes softened. They weren't frightening. They were lonely. Hades watched her. "You see them as they are," he said softly. "Not as mortals fear them." She looked back at him. "You rule over them?" "I keep them," he answered, "so they do not fade." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. Not fear, but a kind of quiet sadness. This wasn't the tyrant of stories. This was someone who had spent eternity watching what was loved and lost. Persephone turned her gaze to the endless black river beyond the hall. It flowed without sound, carrying silver ripples that shimmered like distant starlight. "This place," she murmured, "it feels asleep." "It is," said Hades. "It has been sleeping since time began." She closed her eyes. "Then why wake it with me?" He hesitated, as though the question had pierced something deeper. Finally, his voice came again, barely a whisper. "Because even the dead should remember what life looks like." The words settled between them like falling dust. Persephone said nothing. She simply stood there, her white dress faintly glowing in the gloom. A single fragment of spring in a kingdom that had never seen it. Days passed, or maybe it was hours. Time in the underworld did not move. It exhaled. Everywhere she went, shadows followed her, curious, watchful. And slowly, where she stepped, something began to happen. The ground, once dry and cold, grew softer, damp, as if remembering the feel of rain. Tiny shoots of green pushed through cracks in the marble. The souls drifted closer, their light warmer now, and Hades watched from afar. He said nothing, but his eyes spoke in a language older than words. One evening, or whatever passed for evening down there, he approached her once more. The river behind him glimmered faintly, casting silver ripples across the chamber walls. "I have not seen the world change in 1,000 years, he said. "And yet, in your presence, even the dead seem to dream." Persephone looked at him, really looked. The way his hands trembled slightly when he spoke, the tiredness in his shoulders, the loneliness wrapped around him like a second skin. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "you were never meant to rule over death. You were meant to understand it." He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw the man beneath the god. A silence followed, the kind that carries meaning instead of emptiness. Far above them, unseen by both, Demeter searched, her tears turning the soil barren. The world grew cold, but deep below, life was quietly beginning again, not in sunlight but in shadow. And though Persephone did not yet know it, her presence was changing everything. Even the darkness had begun to breathe, because wherever she walked, the earth remembered what it once was, and what it could be again. This was not the end of her story. It was the moment the underworld opened its eyes, and began to dream of spring. The underworld was never meant to hold the light, yet somehow it did now. It began subtly, a faint shimmer against the black marble, a whisper of color in a place that had forgotten what color was. Everywhere Persephone walked, something small, something impossible, began to bloom. At first, Hades thought it was illusion, the tricks of a tired mind. But then he saw it. Tiny white blossoms curling along the edge of her footsteps, not bright like the flowers above, but soft, pale things that glowed in the dark, like hope had taken root in shadow. The souls gathered near her too, drawn to her presence like moths to a distant flame. They no longer drifted aimlessly. They circled her gently, silent witnesses to her strange magic. Persephone didn't know why it was happening. She only felt something deep inside her stir, a pulse that answered the heartbeat of the earth. A song, quiet but ancient, echoing through her veins. One evening, as the mist along the river Styx thickened into silver clouds, Hades appeared once more. His expression was softer now, less of a ruler, more of a listener. "You bring change where change should not exist," he said quietly. "Even the dead remember warmth when you pass." Persephone's eyes were distant. "I did not ask for this gift," she replied, "or this prison." Hades looked away, his voice low. "Nor did I ask for eternity." For a moment, silence. Then she spoke again, her tone gentler now. "Do you ever wish you could return to the world above?" He paused, almost startled by the question. "When I first came here," he said, "I thought it was punishment. But over time I learned every god has their realm. Zeus commands the skies, Poseidon rules the sea, and I—" He looked around at the endless shadows. "I hold the quiet." Persephone watched him, and for the first time, she didn't see darkness. She saw devotion. a solemn tenderness for the forgotten. The quiet between them deepened, until the sound of the river became a lullaby. The souls floated slower, as if time itself had decided to rest. Days passed, or maybe years. The underworld does not keep count. But something undeniable was happening. The souls no longer whispered in sorrow. They hummed softly, faintly, like memories being soothed. The halls began to change too. Once cold and colorless, they shimmered now with faint veins of light, as if the marble itself remembered the sun. The dead no longer feared her. They bowed, and in their quiet reverence, the underworld named her something new. Kore no more. The maiden was gone. Now she was Persephone, the queen of shadows. Hades watched her ascend her throne for the first time. It was carved of black stone and gold dust, not a seat of power but of balance. When she sat, the underworld did not tremble. It breathed. He approached her slowly, his voice steady but low. You have brought life to the dead. You have turned silence into song. You are not a guest here anymore. Persephone met his gaze. I never wanted to rule, she said softly. But maybe this is what I was meant to become. Her words carried a strange peace. Acceptance, not surrender. For the first time, she didn't long for sunlight. She could feel it, hidden in her, woven into her like a secret fire that no darkness could extinguish. And Hades, he saw it too. He bowed his head, not as a king, but as someone who had found the missing half of his eternity. From then on, the underworld changed. It was still a place of death, but no longer of despair. Where Persephone walked, the air grew lighter. Where she spoke, the restless souls found calm. The rivers of forgetfulness shimmered like dawn mist. Even Cerberus, the great three-headed guardian, lay quietly at her feet. Above, the mortal world remained barren. Demeter still wept, but whispers began to rise among the gods. That spring could never truly die, as long as Persephone's heart still held its warmth. And so, slowly, the threads of fate began to weave again. The world above and below were pulling toward each other, light and shadow seeking balance. Persephone, in her quiet throne, felt it too. A tug, a call, the voice of her mother carried on the wind of memory. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she could feel the sunlight again, faint, distant but alive. She smiled, not sadly but knowingly, because deep inside her, she understood something the gods had forgotten. There is no light without shadow, and no death without the promise of return. The Queen of Shadows had found her truth, and the underworld, for the first time, had found its spring. Time does not move in the underworld. It flows slow and endless, like a river that never reaches the sea. But even eternity can feel a change. Something was shifting. Persephone could feel it in the rhythm of her heart. A faint warmth, a pull from above, like sunlight filtering through a dream. It was her mother's call. Far above, Demeter still wandered the empty fields, her golden hair tangled with frost, her eyes hollow with longing. She had searched across mountains and oceans, through temples and tombs, crying her daughter's name into the wind. But now, for the first time in an age, she felt something stir beneath her feet. A heartbeat. The earth whispered back. Below, in the quiet halls of the dead, Persephone sat beside the black river, her reflection rippling faintly in its surface. Hades stood behind her, still, but heavy with thought. It's calling you again, he said softly. She didn't need to answer. He already knew. I can feel her, Persephone whispered. She's crying. Hades' eyes darkened with something deeper than sorrow. The world above is dying without you, he said. Every seed waits for your touch. Every root has grown cold. She looked at him, and for the first time, there was no fear, only understanding. You knew this would happen. He nodded. When I brought you here, I thought I was claiming something beautiful. But beauty cannot be kept. It must breathe. A silence fell between them, soft and infinite. The river shimmered faintly, reflecting both light and shadow, as if the two worlds had met there in its stillness. Hades turned away, his voice barely a whisper. If you go, the underworld will sleep again. The souls will wander. The cold will return. And if I stay, she said gently, the world above will fade into dust. They both knew what must be done. Persephone rose, her gown of twilight silk whispering across the marble floor. The blossoms she had brought to life still glowed faintly, white petals breathing in the dark. She touched one, and it shimmered gold. Then she turned to him. Let me return, she said. But promise me, when the earth sleeps again, I will come back to wake the dark. Hades met her gaze, and though no god had ever wept, something glistened behind his eyes. I will wait, he said simply. For you, even eternity will pass like a moment. The gate to the upper world opened, slowly, silently, a crack of light breaking through the endless night. Persephone stepped forward, her fingers brushing against his for the last time. The touch burned not with pain but memory. And then, she was gone. The earth gasped awake. Above, Demeter fell to her knees. The snow melted. Rivers ran wild with laughter. Fields burst into color. Poppies, daisies, wheat. 1,000 blooms that had waited for her return. And in the center of it all, Persephone stood bathed in sunlight. Her mother ran to her, and for the first time since the dawn of winter, the gods heard joy again. The world rejoiced. The air shimmered, and spring was born anew. But even as the sunlight warmed her skin, Persephone could feel the pull, a soft echo from below, a promise whispered in the dark. Because though she walked among the living, half her heart still belonged to the shadows. And so it was decreed. For half the year, Persephone would live with her mother, and the earth would bloom. But when autumn's chill began to creep in, she would descend once more, to the underworld, to the man who had waited in silence. When she left, the leaves would fall, the earth would sleep, and winter would come. But she always returned, always, and from that rhythm, light and dark, life and death, love and loss, the seasons were born. The mortals would never know the truth. To them, spring was simply a season, flowers just a miracle. But the gods knew better. Every bloom, every thaw, every breath of new life was Persephone's promise. Sometimes, on quiet nights, Hades would stand beside the river Styx, watching the surface shimmer faintly, and for a moment, he could almost see her there, the flicker of her dress, the warmth of her laughter carried by a ghost of light. He would close his eyes and whisper, "She will return." And she always did, because this was not a story of loss. It was a story of balance, of how even darkness learned to bloom, and how love found its home in both shadow and sunlight. Persephone, the girl of blossoms, the queen of the dead, the bridge between two worlds, where she walked, life and death danced in harmony, and the earth, forever breathing in her rhythm, never forgot her name.